After a while, she looked up and noticed him standing there. She froze for a moment, almost guilty, like she had done something wrong. He shook his head and smiled. "You like those?" he asked gently. She nodded, her eyes lowering. There. Fun. Fun wasn't the word he would have picked for those puzzles. Challenging, maybe, but fun. That made him curious. "Do you want more like that?" he asked. She shrugged, but the quiet excitement on her face spoke louder than words. It was the first sign that maybe she had a mind that worked in a way he had not fully understood yet. Over the next days, he noticed more things. She understood patterns extremely quickly. She memorized small details in their conversations. She learned how his broken laptop worked just by watching him use it once. And when it refused to turn on one night, she gently took it into her lap, opened the back without fear, started checking the cables. He nearly panicked. "Careful with that," he said. "It's old." And, "I know," she replied quietly. "But it's easy to fix." She said it so naturally that he didn't know how to respond. She seemed to understand the internal components like she had seen them 100 times. In less than 10 minutes, she connected a loose wire and handed the laptop back. When it turned on instantly, he didn't know whether to laugh or question everything he thought he knew. Watching her brought back memories of the world he once loved, the world of ideas, innovation, and possibilities. Before the scandal had ruined him, he used to believe he could build anything. But now it seemed she was the one with that power. Still, he didn't rush to conclusions. She was a child who had gone through too much. She deserved calm, safety, and time before anything else. But the world has a way of revealing truth, even when someone tries to ignore it. One afternoon, he brought home a stack of school-level workbooks, unsure if she would like them. She flipped through them with polite interest, then quietly worked through an entire math book in one evening. He checked her answers. All correct. The next day, he gave her a high-level logic packet he had downloaded from a free website. She finished it faster than he could read through the questions. After that, he realized her abilities weren't just unusual, they were extraordinary. Still, he didn't want to overwhelm her. She had only recently begun to feel safe, so he encouraged her gently, praising her when she solved something hard, letting her explore anything that sparked her curiosity. Soon she began asking questions about how technology worked, how businesses operated, how people built systems that changed industries. These weren't questions that ordinary children asked. These were questions he remembered hearing in boardrooms from trained innovators. One evening, while he was cooking dinner, she sat at the table with his old laptop. At first he assumed she was watching videos or reading something simple, but her face was too focused, too thoughtful. "What are you working on?" he asked. She hesitated before turning the screen toward him. "I was just trying something." It wasn't a drawing. It wasn't a simple game. She had written lines of actual code that created a small program capable of organizing information into clean categories based on patterns. He stared at it in disbelief. "Where did you learn to do this?" She shrugged. "I saw someone do it at the library once. And I read a book, and I just tried until it worked." He knew adults who had studied for years and still struggled to write code like that. He sat down next to her, taking in what she had created. "Do you know how impressive this is?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled slightly, nervous. "I just like figuring things out," she said. "It feels peaceful." The words settled in his mind. In a life filled with fear and uncertainty, her mind had become her safest place. The next day, he called a small local school to ask about placement tests. He didn't tell them much and Len that she needed to be tested to find the right level for her. They gave him an appointment. The morning of the test, she looked frightened. He knelt in front of her and spoke softly. "It's not to judge you," he said. "It's just to understand where you belong. And whatever happens, you're safe. I'm here." She nodded quietly. At the school, the teachers watched as she moved through the test with a calm confidence. She didn't rush, but she never hesitated either. She worked through advanced sections that most teenagers struggled with. When she handed in the papers, the room fell silent. Later, one of the teachers approached him, looking stunned. "She isn't just ahead," the teacher said. "She is operating on a completely different level. We rarely see this." He felt a strange mixture of pride and worry. He wanted her to shine, but he also wanted her to be protected from unwanted attention. Over the next week, she started attending school for a few hours each day. She didn't talk much, but her teachers frequently contacted him with shocked amazement. She absorbed information like a sponge. She asked deep questions that left adults speechless. She even helped another student understand a concept the teacher had struggled to explain. One afternoon, she came home holding a small slip of paper. She placed it on the table and looked unsure. "What's this?" He asked. "Something the science teacher gave me," she said. "He said it might be something I'd enjoy." He looked at the paper. It was an invitation to a local tech workshop for young innovators. Her eyes searched his face nervously, unsure of how he would respond. "Do you want to go?" he asked. She nodded once, almost too shy to speak, so he took her. The workshop was filled with eager students typing on laptops, building small robotic pieces and pitching ideas to volunteers. She walked in quietly, but her eyes lit up. It was as if she had stepped into a place she had always belonged without ever knowing it existed. She sat at a station with a laptop and began exploring ideas. He watched from the side as she created small digital tools faster than most adults in the room. A visiting expert noticed her work and approached. "How long have you been programming?" the expert asked. She looked at the floor. "A few days," she whispered. The expert blinked. "That's remarkable." Stayed silent, letting her experience the moment. She deserved to hear praise from people who recognized her gifts. On the walk home, she held the workshop pamphlet tightly. "Did you like it?" he asked. She gave a small, genuine smile, one of the first he had seen. It felt like the world made sense there. She said. Those words stayed with him for the rest of the evening. Days passed, and her ideas grew bolder. She started sketching concepts in notebooks, drawings of systems, data flows, simple algorithms that analyzed patterns. She didn't know the industry terms for them yet, but the logic behind her thinking was astonishing. One night, she showed him something new. A simple version of a tool that recognized common patterns in information and predicted likely outcomes. "Where did you get this idea?" he asked softly. She shrugged. It just made sense that if things repeat, you can guess what comes next. He stared at the screen. He had once worked with teams of analysts who struggled to build programs half as efficient. Her mind was something rare, but he never told her.
Wow.
She was special in a way that would overwhelm her. Instead, he encouraged her step by step. He asked questions. He listened to her ideas. He let her explore without pressure. Together, they started refining her program. He suggested small adjustments, and she transformed them into something even better. It felt strange working on a project again after losing everything, but this time, it wasn't about fame or money. It was about her, about giving her a future. One evening, while they sat at the kitchen table surrounded by notes and papers, she looked up and said softly, "Thank you for believing in me." He felt his chest tighten. "You gave me a reason to believe again," he replied. Those words hung in the air, warm and heavy. She wasn't just a child he had rescued. She was becoming a partner in something bigger, something neither of them had expected. And though the world still laughed behind his back, still whispered about his failures, he didn't care anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, something extraordinary was beginning, something the world wouldn't be laughing at. For long, the morning sunlight crept slowly through the thin curtains of the small apartment, touching the papers spread across the kitchen table. They had spent late nights working together, and the papers now showed diagrams, half-finished ideas, and handwritten notes in both of their handwriting. The room looked like the inside of a growing mind, full of ideas waiting to be shaped. He sat at the table with a cup of warm tea, watching her as she leaned over the laptop. She worked quietly, her eyes moving quickly across the screen as she typed. There was something calm and sure in her movements, the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what she wanted to create. "You're up early," he said softly. She didn't look away from the screen. "I wanted to fix something in the program before I forgot the idea." He smiled as he took a slow sip. "Is it going well?" She nodded, then finally turned toward him. "I think I made it faster and more accurate." He didn't understand every technical detail like she did, but he knew enough to see that her idea had grown far beyond a simple tool. She had created something with real potential, something that could change the way people understood information and patterns. He leaned forward and gently rested his elbows on the table. "I'm very proud of you," he said. Victor Hale had once been the kind of man people pointed at with admiration. His name used to shine in business magazines, and reporters followed him at events, hoping for a quote or even a smile. He had built companies from the ground up, closing deals that others believed were impossible. When he entered a room, people straightened their backs and softened their voices. They treated him like someone who had everything figured out, but life has its own strange timing. One wrong investment, one business partner who chose greed over loyalty, and one storm of rumors spreading faster than the truth could follow these things were enough to pull Victor's world out from under him. It didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, painfully, like a rope tearing thread by thread. At first, he thought the financial hit was manageable. A few losses, a few bad headlines. He had survived worse in the early years of his career. But this time, the damage kept growing. Investors panicked. Partners backed out. Banks demanded answers he didn't have. And before long, Victor found himself facing a reality he never imagined. Bankruptcy. The day the announcement became public, everything changed. People he had once trusted avoided him, as if his misfortune were contagious. The same reporters who once praised him now wanted to film his downfall. Business acquaintances who had smiled at him days earlier suddenly claimed they barely knew him. His large home, with its tall windows and polished floors, no longer belonged to him. He had to sell it to cover what little he could. He watched strangers walk through the halls during the sale, pointing at furniture he had chosen himself, laughing while they decided what to buy. Nothing about the moment felt real. It was like standing outside his own life. When it was over, Victor carried only a few boxes into a small, aging apartment on the edge of the city. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. At night, he could hear the hum of old pipes and distant traffic. The first evening there, sat on the edge of his new bed and let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "This is it," whispered to himself. For days, Victor didn't speak to anyone. Most people had stopped calling anyway. A few sent messages saying they were sorry for what happened, but their words felt empty. He could tell they were more afraid of being associated with him than they were concerned for his well-being. Still, he answered politely, because he didn't know what else to do. He tried to keep a routine. In the mornings, he walked to a nearby cafe for a cup of cheap coffee. In the afternoons, he looked online for small consulting jobs, anything to stay busy. But most offers had dried up, and the few that remained paid barely enough to cover his rent. Evenings were the hardest. That was when memories pressed in on him the most. He remembered long meetings in his old glass office, the sound of applause at conferences, the pride he felt when his team reached goals no one believed were possible. All of it now felt like a dream he had woken from too quickly. Sometimes he asked himself where everything went wrong. Was it the investment he trusted too blindly? Was it the partner who betrayed him? Or was it his own pride, his own belief that nothing could shake him? These thoughts kept him awake at night, staring at the dim ceiling, wondering how a world so big could suddenly feel so small. One cold evening, Victor decided to take a longer walk than usual. The apartment felt too heavy, too filled with thoughts he wasn't ready to face. The wind outside was sharp, brushing against his face and bringing a kind of numb clarity with it. He walked past closed shops and quiet restaurants, letting the movement ease the tight feeling in his chest. As he passed a small diner, something made him pause. At first, he thought it was just a shadow near the back wall of the building. But when he looked closer, he saw a small figure curled up beside the garbage bins. The figure was tiny, much smaller than he expected. A child. Victor frowned. He wasn't sure what to do. Children sometimes wandered outside restaurants, but this felt different. The girl looked like she was trying to make herself invisible, hugging her knees tightly. Wearing a thin coat, far too small for the freezing weather, he took a small step forward. "Careful not to scare her. Are you all right?" he asked softly. The girl lifted her head just enough for him to see her eyes. They were tired, guarded, and far older than they should have been at her age. She didn't answer, just watched him carefully, ready to run if she needed to. Victor raised his hands a little, showing he wasn't a threat. "It's cold out here," he said. "You should be somewhere warm." Still no answer. For a moment, Victor considered walking away. He was already dealing with so much, and he wasn't sure he was in any state to help someone else. But then he saw her shiver, a quick trembling through her shoulders. And something inside him refused to ignore it. He tried again. "Do you have a place to go?" The girl shook her head slowly. That tiny movement hit him harder than he expected. He had lost everything, yes, but he still had a roof over his head. He still had a warm bed and enough money to eat. This girl didn't even have that. Victor stepped aside, leaving a bit of space between them. "There's a diner here," he said gently. "If you want, I can get you something warm to eat. Just a meal. No questions if you don't want to talk." The girl hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the door of the diner, then back at him, unsure whether to trust him. She looked like someone who had learned to expect the worst from people. After a long pause, she nodded. Victor felt a quiet sense of relief. He held the door for her as they walked inside. The waitress gave them a curious look, but Victor simply asked for a hot soup and a sandwich. The girl sat across from him, still silent, staring at the table rather than at him. When the food came, she didn't wait. She ate like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Victor didn't rush her. He just watched, making sure she knew she was safe. After a while, he tried to speak again. "Do you live around here?" The girl shook her head. "Do you have any family I can call?" She shook her head again, this time lowering her eyes. A small ache moved through Victor's chest. He had lost fortunes, homes, and friendships, but at least he had memories of where he came from. This child had nothing, not even a name she was ready to share. When the meal was finished, the girl quietly folded her hands in her lap, as if waiting for him to make the next move. Victor didn't know why the moment affected him so deeply. Maybe it was the way she sat so still, like someone afraid of making a mistake. Maybe it was because she looked like she had lived through more hardship than any child should. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in months, he felt something other than loss. He felt needed. He cleared his throat gently. "Do you have anywhere you can stay tonight?" The girl looked down again, then shook her head once more. Victor hesitated. Bringing a stranger, especially a child, into his home was not a simple decision. He knew there were rules, procedures, things he should probably do through official channels. But he also knew she couldn't stay outside in the freezing cold. "Listen," he said softly. "I have a small apartment not far from here. It's not much, but it's warm. If you want, you can stay there tonight. Just for the night. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I won't ask questions you don't want to answer." The girl stared at him for a long moment. He saw the conflict in her eyes, fear, doubt, hope, caution. Finally, she gave the smallest nod. Something inside Victor softened at that tiny gesture. They walked back to his apartment slowly. The streets were quiet, and the cold air pressed around them. When they reached the building, Victor unlocked the door and gently said, "You can take the bed tonight. I'll sleep on the couch." The girl didn't argue. She stepped inside carefully, like someone who expected the floor to collapse beneath her. Victor gave her a blanket and stepped out of the room, giving her space. He could hear her quietly settling in, her footsteps soft and cautious. When he finally lay down on the couch, he stared at the ceiling, thinking about how strange life had become. Not long ago, he had been surrounded by luxury and applause. Now he was in a small apartment, offering shelter to a child he didn't even know. Yet, for the first time in months, Victor didn't feel completely alone. He didn't know who the girl was. He didn't know her story. But he had a feeling deep, instinctive, that meeting her was going to change something. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And he couldn't shake the sense that this moment, quiet and unexpected, was the beginning of something bigger than he could imagine. Victor, woke up early the next morning with a stiff neck from sleeping on the couch. For a moment, he forgot the events of the previous night. Then he heard a soft sound coming from the bedroom, the quiet shuffle of small feet. Everything came back to him. The girl, she had been so silent and unsure. Like someone who expected every offer of kindness to disappear if she blinked. Victor sat up slowly, listening. He didn't want to startle her. The apartment was old and not very large, so every sound felt louder than it should. He cleared his throat softly. "Good morning," he called out. There was a pause. Then the girl stepped into the doorway. She still wore the same thin coat from the night before, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to take it off. Her hair was messy, and her eyes looked a little less fearful now, but still unsure. "Did you sleep okay?" Victor asked. She gave a small nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. Victor stood up and tried to act as gentle as possible. "I'm going to make some breakfast." "Do you like eggs?" The girl shrugged lightly, then nodded again. He walked into the kitchen, which was really just a corner of the apartment with a stove, a small fridge, and a few cabinets. He wasn't the best cook, but he could handle scrambled eggs and toast. While he worked, he glanced her way. She sat on the couch, with her hands folded in her lap. Watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution, the silence felt heavy, but not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. When the food was ready, he placed a plate in front of her. "Here you go." She hesitated for a moment before taking a bite. Then she ate slowly, as if trying not to appear too hungry even though she clearly was. Victor sat across from her with his own plate. He didn't want to ask too many questions at once, but he knew he needed to learn at least a little bit about her situation. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. She froze for a second. Her fork stopped in midair. Then she whispered, "Mara." Her voice was so soft that Victor almost didn't hear it. "That's a beautiful name," he said with a smile. She didn't smile back, but her eyes softened a little. He didn't push further. If she wanted to talk more, she would. For now, it was enough that she trusted him enough to speak at all. After breakfast, Victor cleaned the dishes while Mara sat quietly, looking around the apartment. It wasn't a beautiful place, not compared to the home he used to have. The walls were plain, the furniture was old, and the windows let in a draft on cold mornings. But for Mara, it must have felt safer than the street. The thought made Victor's heart tighten. He turned to her slowly. "Mara, I know last night was cold, and I'm glad you came with me. But we need to figure out what to do next. I want to help you, but we should talk to someone who knows how to handle things properly." Her eyes widened with panic. "No," she whispered quickly. "Please." Victor stepped closer, raising his hands in reassurance. "I'm not going to leave you, I promise. But there are rules. I have to make sure you're safe." She shook her head harder, almost trembling now. "No, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want them to take me." Victor's stomach dropped. He hadn't expected such a strong reaction. "Mara, who's them?" She didn't answer. Tears filled her eyes, and she pressed her lips together tightly. Victor felt something inside him break. Whatever she had been through, it was enough to make the idea of help feel like danger. He knelt down in front of her so they were eye level. "Listen," he said softly. "I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you. I just want to make sure you're safe. If there's something you don't want to talk about right now, that's okay. But I won't let anyone hurt you. You're not alone anymore." Mara took a shaky breath and nodded just a little. Victor stood up slowly. This wasn't simple. He knew he couldn't just keep a child without telling anyone. But he also knew that sending her to a shelter or back into a system she obviously feared wasn't the answer. He needed to find a way to help her without breaking her trust. For now, the best thing he could do was create a sense of safety. He placed a warm blanket around her shoulders. "Why don't you rest a little? I need to go out for a bit to handle something, but I'll be back soon. I promise." Mara clutched the blanket and nodded again. She didn't ask where he was going. Maybe she didn't want to know in case the answer scared her. When Victor stepped outside, the cold air hit him like a wave. He took a deep breath, and started walking toward the small community center a few blocks away. He knew someone who worked there, a social worker named Linda, who had always been kind when they had crossed paths years ago. He didn't tell her everything, only that he had found a homeless girl who was scared and needed help. He asked about the safest, least frightening options. Some kids are terrified of shelters, she said thoughtfully, especially if they've had bad experiences before. If she's calm with you, that's a good sign. But you'll need to officially notify child services soon. If she feels safe, it can be a smooth process. Victor nodded, though his stomach tightened with worry. He didn't want to betray Mara's trust. What should I do in the meantime? He asked. Linda smiled gently. Make her feel safe. Give her space. Let her know she has choices. Kids like her, they've usually had every choice taken from them. A little kindness can go a long way. Victor left feeling both relieved and uncertain. He knew what he had to do, but he hoped Mara wouldn't see it as a betrayal. When he returned to the apartment, he found her sitting on the couch, wrapped tightly in the blanket. Watching the door carefully like she'd been afraid he might not come back, he offered her a soft smile. See, I told you I'd return. She relaxed slightly. The rest of the day passed quietly. Mara stayed close to the couch, sometimes watching the old TV, sometimes just staring out the window. Victor tried to keep the atmosphere light. He made lunch and dinner, showing her where everything was in case she ever needed it. She didn't talk much, but she listened closely, absorbing everything. As evening approached, Victor sat down across from her. Mara, I need to ask you something. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But I want you to know you're safe here. No one is going to take you away without talking to both of us. She held the blanket tighter, but nodded. Were you living on the streets for a long time? She lowered her head. A while. Were you with anyone? Or were you alone? Alone. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Victor's heart clenched. A child alone on the streets. It hurt to imagine. Did someone hurt you? Is that why you're scared of going somewhere else? She didn't give a full answer. She just said, I don't want to go back. Victor understood that was all she could give for now. He didn't push further. Okay? He whispered. You don't have to talk about it. Not until you're ready. But I want to help you. I want you to stay somewhere safe. And if you want, you can stay here for now. Mara lifted her eyes slowly. There was a tiny flicker of relief. They're small, but real. You're not afraid to have me here? She asked quietly. No, Victor said without hesitation. Not at all. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to understand why someone with nothing to gain would help her. Finally, she gave a small nod. That night, Victor gave her the bedroom again. She lay down slowly, almost like she didn't believe the bed belonged to her even for one night. Victor stood in the doorway for a moment. If you need anything, just call me, he said softly. Okay? Her voice was small, but a little steadier. He turned off the light and returned to the couch. As he lay down, he couldn't help thinking about how unusual his life had become. Just a few weeks earlier, he had been drowning in his own problems. Bankruptcy, loss, disappointment. He had felt empty, like he had nothing left to offer the world. But now, somehow he felt a sense of purpose again. Helping Mara didn't solve his problems. His financial struggles were still real. His reputation was still damaged. His future was still uncertain, but taking care of her, even in this small way, made something inside him feel whole again. The next morning, Victor woke up early again. This time, when he opened his eyes, he found Mara standing near the couch. Watching him with a curious expression, "Good morning," he said with a gentle smile. She shifted slightly. Can I help with breakfast today?" Victor felt warmth spread through him. It was such a simple question, but it said so much. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to trust him. "Of course you can," he said. They moved around the kitchen together, working slowly and carefully. Mara didn't talk much, but her movements were calmer, more relaxed, less afraid. While they cooked, Victor tried to think about the next steps. He had to contact the authorities eventually, but he needed to make sure Mara understood she wasn't being abandoned. He needed to find a way to give her stability, something she had clearly been missing for a long time. For now, though, he decided to focus on the moment, on the small progress she was making, on the fragile trust she was building with him. For the first time in a long while, the apartment felt a little warmer. Victor didn't know what the future held for either of them. But he knew one thing with certainty. He wasn't going to walk away from Mara. Not now. Not ever. She had entered his life unexpectedly, like a quiet gust of wind on a cold night. But she had brought with her a spark he didn't know he needed, and he was determined to protect that spark, no matter what came next. Victor woke before the sun rose, the apartment still dim and quiet. For a moment, he lay still on the couch, listening. The old heater clicked softly in the corner, and somewhere outside a bird began chirping. It was peaceful in a way he had not felt in months. Then he remembered Mara. He sat up slowly and glanced toward the bedroom door. It was slightly open, just as she had left it the night before. Victor stretched, rubbed his tired eyes, and walked to the small kitchen to make coffee. As he moved around, he tried to be quiet so he wouldn't wake her. But when he turned around, he found her already sitting on one of the chairs, her knees pulled up and her hands wrapped around a cup of warm water he had left out for her. "You're up early," he said with a gentle smile. She shrugged softly. "I don't sleep much." Her voice was calmer than the day before, though still soft. Victor sensed she wasn't used to having long nights of rest. Perhaps she was used to staying alert. Maybe sleep had never been safe for her. "Do you want breakfast?" he asked. She nodded. They worked together again, but this time Mara moved with a little more confidence. She didn't wait for him to tell her what to do. She picked up a bowl, cracked eggs with neat precision, and whisked them smoothly. Victor watched her hands. She worked with a focus far beyond her age. "You're good at that," he commented lightly. Mara didn't smile, but she quietly said, "I help in kitchens sometimes." "People give food if you help." Victor's stomach tightened. He didn't want her to feel like she had to earn every meal here. He wanted her to feel safe. "You don't have to work for food here," he said softly. "You can just eat. That's enough." She paused, as if trying to understand that idea. "Okay," she said finally, though she didn't sound fully convinced. After breakfast, Victor sat at the small table with his laptop open, trying to search for job opportunities again. He had done it every day since he lost everything, but the options were always limited. Still, he kept looking. He couldn't just sit around. Mara stood by the window, watching cars pass on the street below. Then she slowly walked over and peered at his laptop screen. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking for work," Victor replied. "Consulting mostly. Helping small businesses." She leaned in closer, scanning the text on the page. He watched her eyes move quickly, as if she was absorbing everything at once. Then she said quietly, "Your computer's slow." Victor laughed softly. "Yes, it's an old one. I couldn't save my newer devices after everything happened." She didn't comment on that. Instead, she pointed to the keyboard. "Can I see something?" she asked. Victor hesitated for a moment, then nodded and pushed the laptop toward her. Mara sat down, her small hands resting on the keys. She opened a new tab, typed swiftly, and began clicking through settings. Her movements were precise, confident, not random tapping, but real knowledge. Victor watched with raised eyebrows. "You know computers?" She shook her head lightly. "Not really." But her speed suggested otherwise. She went through files, settings, system, tools, places most people avoided because they were hard to understand. She made adjustments without hesitation. After a few minutes, she clicked the browser again and tested how fast it loaded. "It works better now," she said simply. Victor stared at the screen. She was right. It was noticeably faster. "How did you do that?" he asked, honestly impressed. Mara shrugged again. "I just know what to click." It wasn't arrogance, just a simple statement. Victor felt curiosity growing inside him. How much did she really know? How had she learned? She didn't look like someone who had been in school recently, or maybe ever. But he didn't want to overwhelm her with questions, so he let the moment pass. Later in the day, Victor stepped away from the table to take a quick call. He wasn't expecting much. Most calls ended with some polite version of, "We'll keep you in mind." But he had to try. While he spoke quietly in the corner, he glanced over at Mara. She was back at the laptop, staring at the screen with deep focus. He didn't interrupt her. When the call ended, he walked over and looked at the screen. She had opened a puzzle website, something with complex number patterns and logic problems. "What are you doing there?" Victor asked. "Just trying something," she murmured. He watched her solve the first puzzle in seconds. He blinked. "You've done that before?" "No," she said. "But it's easy. You just look for the pattern." Victor leaned closer. "Can you show me?" She walked him through it step by step. Her explanation was simple but sharp. Her brain made connections so quickly that it surprised him. "You're very smart," Victor said softly. She froze, as if unsure whether that was something she was allowed to be. "No one ever told me that," she said finally. Something about her voice made Victor's heart ache. He wondered how many things Mara had lost beyond a warm bed or a safe home. Maybe she had lost the chance to be seen, truly seen for who she was. As the day went on, Victor began noticing more patterns in her behavior. She watched everything, studied everything. The books on his shelf, the way he stacked dishes, the layout of the apartment. She seemed to absorb it all at one point. He realized she had quietly reorganized his messy drawer without him noticing. When he opened it later, everything was arranged neatly, pens together, papers stacked, broken items set aside. "You organized this?" he asked. Mara looked down at her hands. "It was messy," she said softly. "Well, it looks much better." "Thank you," she smiled. A small, shy smile, but real. Victor felt a growing sense that there was far more to Mara than anyone had ever recognized. In the late afternoon, Victor decided they should take a short walk. He didn't want her to feel trapped in the apartment. Mara hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. They walked to a small park nearby. Children played on swings, and families sat on benches. Mara watched them quietly, her expression unreadable. "Did you ever go to school?" Victor asked gently. She shook her head. "Not really. Do you want to? If you ever feel ready?" She frowned a little. "I don't know. I don't think I'd fit in." Victor looked at her carefully. "I think you'd surprise a lot of people." Mara didn't answer, but she didn't look away. Something in her eyes seemed to soften. On the way back to the apartment, they passed a small bookshop. Mara stopped suddenly, staring through the glass at the rows of books. "Do you like reading?" Victor asked. She hesitated before saying, "I like learning things." Victor thought for a moment, then said, "Come on, let's go inside." Her eyes widened slightly, but she followed. Inside, the shop was quiet and smelled of old pages. Mara walked slowly between shelves, her fingers lightly brushing the covers as if afraid to disturb them. Victor watched her pick up a book on basic math and flip through it quickly. "You like that one?" he asked. She shook her head. "I know all this already." Victor raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" She nodded. She moved along the shelf and picked up another book, this one on more advanced concepts. She skimmed that too. Then she looked up at him. "This is interesting," she said. Victor smiled. "Then we'll get it." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really." She held the book tightly, as if it might disappear if she relaxed her grip. When they returned home, Mara sat at the table and opened the book immediately. Her eyes moved quickly across the page, absorbing each line. Victor made dinner quietly, watching her from the kitchen. She read through the entire first chapter in minutes. He couldn't help but feel stunned. How could a child who had never been properly educated understand things most adults struggled with? How had she survived on the streets with a mind like this? How had no one noticed her before? Later that night, after they cleaned up from dinner, Victor sat beside her on the couch. "Mara," he said softly, "would you like to learn more things like that? Not just from books, maybe from real teachers? People who can show you things I can't?" She closed the book slowly. "I don't know," she whispered. "People don't always like kids like me." Victor shook his head gently. "People would be amazed by you." She looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "You really think so?" "I do." She looked at the book again, then back at him. Maybe one day. Victor smiled. Whenever you're ready. That night, after Mara went to bed, Victor stayed awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling again. But unlike the nights filled with regret and loneliness, tonight his thoughts were different. He felt something blooming inside him, a sense of purpose, of responsibility, of possibility. He realized that Mara was not just a child in need of shelter. She was a bright spark waiting to shine. She was talented in ways he had barely begun to understand, and he knew beyond any doubt that meeting her had not been a coincidence. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he had a feeling that this quiet girl with tired eyes and a brilliant mind would change both of their lives, and he was ready to help her find her place in the world, no matter how long it took. The days inside the small apartment slowly settled into a gentle rhythm. At first, it was just the two of them trying to figure out how to share a space and build a life that made sense. He was still trying to rebuild his confidence after losing everything. And she was still learning how to live in a place where she did not have to hide her food or sleep with one eye open. Somehow, they met in the middle. He found himself waking up earlier, not because he had anywhere to go, but because he found purpose in preparing breakfast for her. She often woke up silently, as if afraid making noise would cause someone to chase her out. But over time, she started making small sounds in the morning footsteps, soft humming, sometimes even a quiet greeting. He held on to these tiny moments like they were pieces of a new beginning. One morning, he walked into the living room to find her sitting cross-legged on the floor with a stack of old puzzle books he had forgotten he owned. Most were filled with logic problems and number challenges he used to enjoy before his life collapsed. He expected her to flip through them as a distraction. Instead, he stood there stunned as she solved page after page with a calm, focused expression. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't want to break her concentration. So he just watched, amazed by how icily she handled tasks that had taken him actual thought years ago. It wasn't just that she solved them, it was how she solved them. Fast, confidently, with an ease that didn't match her age. Her eyes lowered, shy but pleased. I'm just trying to make something useful. Useful. That was exactly what it was becoming. As days passed, she continued refining her program while he helped with organization, planning and thinking about how they could show it to people without overwhelming her. She wasn't ready to be pushed into the spotlight, and he didn't want that for her anyway. All he wanted was to help her take careful steps forward. One afternoon, he received a message from the small tech workshop they had visited weeks ago. The instructor invited them to a community event where young creators could share their projects. It wasn't a competition, just a chance to show ideas. He wasn't sure if she would want to go, so he waited until she took a break and brought it up gently. We're having another event soon, he said. No pressure or anything. Just a place where people show what they're working on. She hesitated. Do people watch a lot? Some, he answered honestly. But it's not a stage. More like small groups talking. She played with the edge of the notebook on the table, thinking. Would you stay with me? He nodded. Of course. I won't leave your side. She thought for a moment longer and gave a soft, nervous smile. Then maybe I can go. That was enough. The day of the event arrived quickly. She wore simple clothes and held her laptop close to her chest, as if it were a shield. He walked beside her, keeping her calm, reminding her that nothing bad would happen, and that she didn't need to impress anyone. Inside the community center, people stood in small clusters, talking excitedly while showing small robots, games, apps, and simple inventions. Some parents stood proudly behind their children. Some teachers guided their students. He felt her hand tremble slightly, so he lowered his voice and spoke softly. Just find a small table and take your time. No rush. She set up her laptop near a quiet corner and opened her program. For a few minutes, no one approached, and she seemed relieved. She typed a few last changes into the code while he stayed close. Then, slowly, things changed. A young volunteer walked by, glanced at the screen, paused and leaned closer. Is that your work? She nodded silently. The volunteer frowned not in confusion, but in surprise. Can you show me what it does? She swallowed nervously, but clicked through the sections of the program. She explained in simple words how it looked for patterns in information, how it learned from examples, and how it predicted future results. The volunteer stared at her, then at the program, then back at her. You built this yourself? With help organizing things, she whispered, but the coding. Yes, within minutes, the volunteer called another instructor over. Then, another. Then a small group surrounded her table. Watching quietly as she demonstrated the tool, he stood behind her, letting her handle the moment but stepping forward if she looked overwhelmed. Each time she glanced his way, he gave a small nod of encouragement. One of the instructors spoke softly so as not to frighten her. This is highly advanced for someone your age. Have you ever considered entering a youth innovation program? She shook her head quickly. I don't like big crowds. The instructor smiled kindly. That's all right. Not everything requires a stage. What you created has real value. He watched her cheeks flush with quiet pride. News traveled fast in small places. Before long, a local journalist who was covering the event asked if she could speak to them. He looked at the girl gently and waited for her signal. She hesitated, but after a long breath, she nodded. The journalist didn't rush her. She asked simple questions: how the idea came to her, how long she worked on it, what she enjoyed about creating things. When asked about her life before the adoption, he gently stepped in to protect her from anything too personal. The journalist respected the boundary, but even with her careful approach, the story spread. Within a week, their inbox filled with messages from small tech groups, teachers and people who wanted to learn more. Some offered guidance. Some offered resources. But the message that surprised him most came from a respected technology firm in the city, one he remembered from his previous life. Before everything fell apart, they asked for a meeting. He nearly deleted the message. He didn't want to drag her into a world of pressure and expectations. But when he showed it to her, she studied it quietly. Do you think they want something bad? She asked. He shook his head. No, but they might expect too much. And I don't want anyone to take advantage of you. She looked at her hands. We can just listen. Right. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, just listening is fine. The office building was tall, with glass walls and busy hallways. He walked beside her, sensing her nervousness. When they stepped into the meeting room, the people inside greeted them politely. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. A woman with a friendly voice spoke first. We've seen the demonstration of your program. We would like to support your development. Not to take it from you, Jess, to help you grow it properly. She looked up, surprised. You mean, like giving tools? Tools, guidance, mentorship, the woman replied. And if you ever want to, we could explore a partnership. But only if it's what you want. He studied the faces in the room. They weren't laughing at him like people once had. They weren't treating her like a child who didn't know anything. They treated her like a young innovator. She took a moment to breathe before asking, would he be part of it too? The woman nodded. Of course, you two built this together. No one is taking that away. The relief on her face softened him. They didn't sign anything that day. They didn't rush. But when they left the building, she held his hand tightly. That wasn't as scary as I thought, she said. He smiled gently. You handled it better than anyone I've ever seen. As weeks turned into months, her program gradually grew with better tools and quiet guidance from the firm. They didn't push her into the spotlight. They didn't overwhelm her. They honored her pace. One afternoon, she sat across from him at the kitchen table again. Papers were everywhere, just like always. She closed her laptop and looked at him with a serious expression. Can I ask something? She said, anything. Why did you help me so much? Even when you didn't know me? He paused. There were many answers. Loneliness, compassion. Seeing his old self in her, but none of those were the whole truth. I helped you, said softly, because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. And because you gave my life meaning again, her eyes grew warm. You gave mine a place to be safe. They sat in silence for a moment. a gentle understanding between them. Not long after, the local news asked for a small interview not about the technology, but about the bond between them. She agreed only if he stayed by her side. During the interview, when asked what she thought about her future, she said something that made his heart tighten. "I want to build things that help people," she said. "And I want him to be part of everything I do. He believed in me when no one else cared." The interviewer turned to him. "And what has she given you?" He looked at the girl who had once been afraid to speak, who now created tools that professionals admired. "She gave me a second chance," he said simply. In the months that followed, their lives transformed not with sudden wealth or fame, but with steady opportunities, support, and quiet respect. The world no longer laughed at him, and they no longer ignored her. Together, they built something that mattered, and it all began the day a broken man helped a lonely girl who turned out to be a quiet, brilliant force ready to change the world.